I'm a photographer living and working in San Francisco, just for context. And I used to work at VSCO with John, my man. And yeah, awesome. Okay. So I was thinking about what to talk about, and I was thinking it'd be fun for me to just reflect on the last 15 years of my life being a photographer and learning photography, and the different ways it has played different roles in my life. So as I've reflected on the last 15 years, I've realized that the two sort of consistent and main themes in my life as a photographer has been this sort of cyclical flow of inspiration and practice and inspiration and practice. And that has looked different at different stages of my life based on where I was or what I was doing or what my profession was at the time, whether it was in high school or whether it was working professionally. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning of how I got into photography and go through sort of each major stage of my life as a photographer and show different ways that this cycle of inspiration and practice has played out. So let's see. It all started in high school when I was about 15, and my friends and I got really into mountain biking, and we started building jumps and ladder bridges, and my friends started building really big jumps and dropping off cliffs. And I got really, I got a little nervous about some of this stuff. I wasn't as gutsy as them. And so here is a video of me trying to keep up with them. I was jumping over a bush at the time, and it didn't go as planned. But at this point in my life, I remembered running into my dad's room and finding his point and shoot camera and sneaking out with it when we would go biking as friends. And I would start photographing my friends biking, and they loved it because they loved seeing, the tricks they were doing and the jumps they were taking and all that stuff. And I loved it because it was sort of the first time in my life that I found something on my own. It wasn't like parents sharing these things or friends sharing these things, something I found on my own. And I found that I was really good at it. And I found that it almost felt like home. It was like the first time in my life that I found something that I was naturally good at. And when you find that as a person, it's a transformative experience, and it sort of changes the whole course of your life. When I found photography, I just felt like a whole new world opened up to me. And so I started photographing my friends mountain biking, and I'm still learning what this camera is and how to use it, and how do I compose an image? How do I, what is an interesting image? These are all things I was wrestling with in high school. And I remember in high school, I would be looking at pictures online of professional photographers taking pictures of mountain bikers. And I remember seeing the image that they would take. And then I would go out that night or that evening with my friends, and I would take a picture and try and mimic. Okay, I remember they would put the person in the sky here, or they would create this sort of motion blur. And I remember just that sort of cycle of inspiration. I was always looking at imagery from professionals, and I was trying to pretty much recreate it in my own life as a 16-year-old. And I remember at this point in my life, there was the inspiration and there was my pictures, and it felt like I would put them side by side, and there was a big gap between them. And I was just learning, but that gap between them was a little frustrating because I was like, how do they do that? How does this person get this image? And later on in life, I realized that gap between those two things, as you learn and grow, it starts to get a little closer, and you start to able to take the pictures or create the art or the music or whatever your passion is. And you start to get closer to that point of, oh man, I'm starting to understand this. I'm starting to be able to really mimic the inspiration and also find your own voice in that inspiration. And then, so later on in life, I go to college and I get my first digital SLR camera. and I got really carried away with editing, and like this image here of the trash can with the really overly saturated sky, and like I got out of control with depth of field. And this is just all part of my process of learning, learning as a photographer. And I love going back and seeing these, because I look at them now and I'm like, these aren't very good pictures, but this was all part of me learning and growing as a photographer. Like getting your first piece of like real equipment as a photographer can be a really fun, like it sort of opens the world up a little more, and you're like, oh, I can get that depth of field that I saw, a certain photographer do, and how do they do that? And you get the camera and you're like, oh, I get it. That's how they did it. And still at this point in my life in college, I felt like I still had this big gap between what I was looking at, the inspiration, and my own pictures. I wasn't able to really like close that gap. And it was at this point in my life, I got my first job in photography. I started working for a wedding photographer. Her name was Renee Tate, and I was editing her wedding pictures. So during the week, I was going through thousands of wedding photos in Lightroom and just editing them, culling them down, finding the interesting ones. And at the same time, I was also starting to take my own wedding pictures of friends who were getting married. And it was that cycle again of inspiration and practice. During the week, I would be looking at all these images Renee would be taking, and I was really able to see, oh, this is how she composed it. This is how she framed that. Oh, this is, I can see that she shot from this angle to get this emotion. And then when I was going out on my own taking wedding photos, I was able to practice and sort of bring that circle around and started to realize, oh, okay, I saw that image, and now I feel like I have the skills. I'm starting to be able to recreate that image and sort of find my own style in that as well. And that was a really big shift for me. I think that at this point in my life, I was probably like, maybe I've been taking pictures for about 7 or 8 years. That's a long time. And I think that like at this point in my life, I really started to feel like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm taking some good pictures. I started to feel confident, and I started to feel like I had my own sort of voice in photography. And I felt like I started to develop a style. 8 years, I mean, it takes a long time to develop as a human and as an artist. And it takes a lot of sort of like copying your inspiration. I think that's important for a long time to like mimic and copy. But then at a certain point, I feel like we do naturally sort of develop your own voice and inspiration. At this point in my life, I had done weddings for like 3 or 4 years, and I got really burnt out. And it was a strange point because I was so burnt out that I couldn't take pictures anymore. I couldn't like pick up my camera for whatever reason. And this was really hard. This was a really hard time because at that point in my life, like photography was sort of part of my identity, and not having that passion there and not having, I guess, the drive to take pictures, I didn't know what to do with that. But I think that's good. I think that in all of our lives, different hobbies and passions sort of come and go and manifest in different ways. And I think that if you're at a point in your life where something you loved maybe isn't fulfilling that part of you in the way it is, it's okay to take a step back, and it's okay to sort of rest for a while and focus on other things or focus on yourself. I felt like at this point in my life, I had to focus on some hard stuff I was going through in my life. And about a year, I think it was about a year of not taking pictures. And I slowly started to pick my camera up and slowly started to take pictures again. And I started to feel a little bit of momentum sort of coming back in, and a little bit that passion, that original passion I had, it felt like it was coming back. And at this point in my life, I was out of college and I'd gotten a job offer at VSCO. And this was a really sort of, it was like my first job out of college. It was my first sort of like real job. And it was a huge and exciting opportunity. I had been using VSCO to edit probably 2 years before I got that job offer, and I always loved the app. And so the fact that I got to work at VSCO. I was really honored. But when I was there, I was a part of a team called the curation team, and it started out with a couple of us, and the team eventually grew. John was on that team with me, and it was about 10 of us, 10 or 12 of us, and this team of curators we would hand go through, at the time, every image that was uploaded to VSCO. VSCO has like a social platform where you can share images, and we would hand go through every image uploaded to VSCO each week. And during that time when we were curating, we were looking for different images, and we were looking for different voices from the VSCO community and sharing them back to the VSCO community via like VSCO's collection. And this was I think this is probably like the third time in my life where it was like a really big paradigm shift in how I saw photography, because I felt like up to that point in my life, my understanding of photography was pretty limited. It felt like I'd done mountain biking pictures, I'd done wedding photos, and I'd sort of explored how to take pictures of other things. But when I started working at VSCO, our manager, Christina, and Jared were sort of training us to look at photography in like a very wide open perspective. Like, there are so many different and interesting ways to take photos. And it was sort of me going from this to like, whoa, like these were all interesting images. I can do so much more with photography. So along with working at VSCO and being a part of this curation team, and sort of getting a bit of an informal art education, it really opened up my eyes at work to what could be in the VSCO, what the VSCO community is sharing, like what can be an interesting image. And that sort of translated back into my life. It was sort of I was coming out of that year of not taking pictures, and it just felt like sort of the world of photography and my world, the way I viewed it, sort of opened back up again. You know, I think sometimes we get so focused in on our own perspective, and these 10 other curators at VSCO, we all had different perspectives and different interests and sort of different passions, and we all fed off of each other, and it really opened up my understanding of what's interesting. And that was such a gift to work apart on that team, but also such a gift in my life to be introduced to so many new ways of thinking. And I think a part of that paradigm shift that happened was, up to that point, I was mostly taking pictures on like a digital SLR. And sometimes bringing out that big camera was just like a bit of a burden. It's sometimes, it draws a lot of attention to you. It's heavy, you can't really take it anywhere. And I started seeing all these amazing pictures on VSCO, all taken on a camera phone and edited in the VSCO app. And that was a big paradigm shift for me. I thought, oh my gosh, like I can take great images and amazing images with this like tiny little thing that I carry with me everywhere that happens to have like a great camera on it now, which is so special. And so at this point, when I was working at VSCO, it was like my first time pretty much at a desk for 40 hours a week. And I would take a walk every day at 3 to go get coffee, just get out of the office, get some fresh air. And I remember on my walks, I would take pictures, and that would sort of like what I was looking at work when we were curating would inform sort of my photo walk every day. I would just go out and just see what was happening around the city. We're in downtown Oakland. We were in downtown Oakland at the time, and it was fun just to sort of see images during work and then go out and try and sort of recreate them. So that cycle of inspiration and practice it felt like it was able to happen more frequently because I always had my camera on me. I was always able to explore compositions and light and interesting ways to edit because I had it on me, which was so special. And so I think when I look back at the last like 7 years of my life and I've probably taken hundreds of thousands of pictures in the last like 7 years since working at VSCO. And I look back at them, and I think 90% of my favorite images I've taken have been on my phone. And so I wanted to share a couple examples of some of these images I've taken. So these are all taken on my phone, whether it's traveling, whether it's waiting in an airport, or just everyday life, going to the grocery store, going on a bike ride. It's so wonderful to be able to capture things easily And I think like most of these pictures I probably wouldn't have taken if I didn't have my phone on me, because I don't really like to carry my camera around on like an everyday basis, just because it's a bit of a, I don't know, it's just a lot to carry around, draws attention. I don't love that. But yeah, there's so many interesting moments that happen every day, and being able to practice, I think that being able to practice my photography every day with my phone camera has helped keep me sharp, and has helped keep and develop my understanding of photography, so that when I do go out on like a professional shoot, or I go out and shoot a bit more intentionally with my camera, I'm able to incorporate that practice I had been doing daily with my phone camera. So it translates pretty well. So when I was working at, keeping on the theme of inspiration and practice, when I was working at VSCO, one of my coworkers mentioned a photographer by the name of Robert Adams to me, and he said, "Michael, I think you'd really like this photographer." And so I looked him up, and he's, I think he's in his 80s now, and he was taking these really beautiful black and white portraits, I think back in the 60s and 70s. And I really resonated with his images, and I really resonated with the way he edited. And so this is a picture of his on the left here. He sort of photographed the intersection of the man-made world, like this sign, in sort of the natural world, and he sort of looked at both of those topics and how they collide. And so the picture on the left here is Robert Adams, and the picture on the right here is one that I took on my phone. And this is just another example of sort of, I'm always looking at his work, but as I'm going throughout my life, sometimes I'll see a moment and it triggers that, okay, I remember, you know, like this photographer found this interesting, like this scene is interesting. There's some merit to photographing this. So I wanted to show a quick behind the scenes of how I edited this image. So this image up here is the original, which is beautiful. I love it in color. But in black and white, it just gives it a different layer, sort of, a different layer. Okay, so we're in the VSCO app, and you know, there's just so many filters in VSCO, and each of them sort of has its own little look and unique look. But I have a favorites folder of sort of the like 10 main ones that I like to use. So you can favorite filters and just go back to this favorites if you want a quicker way to find the filters you like. And so in VSCO, you know, it's fun to click on different ones and sort of see what each of them feels like. There's this one filter, it's Fuji Neopan 1600, and it's sort of it's really light black and white, has like a nice contrast to it. And I remember finding this filter and realizing, oh my gosh, this like looks really similar to Robert Adams images. And so I remember I got really into editing a lot of pictures in this style for a while, and I still love this filter and use it often. You can play with the strength. I like it at full strength. The character as well. So I think I go in, I crop it down. I'm going to crop it to a 5x4. I'm going to center the weird fence in the image. I think I'm going to bring down the exposure a little bit just to get a bit more contrast between the sky there and the clouds. I think that really made the clouds pop. I also really like the highlight tool because I feel like sometimes the details and the highlights get lost. And so when you put highlights all the way up, you can really see that the details around the clouds, it pops a little more, and the detail in the grass, I feel like it makes each sort of layer of that grass pop out a little more. And then I think with every image, I usually sharpen just a little bit. And then I always like to add just a little bit of grain. I don't get too carried away, but just a little bit. Yeah, and that's that. It's been really fun. I've used the VSCO app for like, I think it's, I don't know how, 10, 12 years maybe. And it's crazy to see sort of the cycle of like using it back in the day and then getting a job there. And then now I haven't worked there for a while, but I still use it every day to edit pictures. And it's fun to watch the journey of the app and sort of the different things that that team is implementing and all the new features that they're working on. So I guess just to come full circle of, I think in life, whether it's like our personal lives or our creative lives, at least in my life, it seems to be like the small steps I take every day, the small bits of practice, or, that one thing on my to-do list that I just need to do. It's these small steps I've taken in my life that have like led to growing and learning photography. And I'm so thankful that I was able to, all the different parts of my career, it's sort of just been all over the place. But I still love it as much as I did the first day, which is amazing. And I'm still looking for inspiration and still trying to find ways to practice my photography. Yeah, I think that is it for my part of the talk. And I think John and I are going to talk a little bit about curation and talk about the curation team and the history of it. John's going to give like a brief background on the history of it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about about curation, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end.
Hi everyone, my name is John Sly, head curator here at VSCO, and this is just sweet because Mike and I met in college, and then we both got a job at VSCO working together, and then also lived together as roommates. He knows all of my habits as a messy kitchen user. But anyways, Mike, before we go on, could you go back into full screen?
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Was I in full screen the whole time?
I think after you stopped sharing the video, it just went into showing the browser tabs.
Okay.
I think you might just have to press the green plus to go back.
Okay. Slideshow.
Can I get that?
Cool.
All right, curation at VSCO. Next slide, please. Mike. Yes. I decided to kind of look back on Mike's profile because I was trying to find what background photo to use on this slide, but I ended up finding all these great photos that Mike took of the curation team. So this is the curation team as seen from Mike. And I know family gets thrown around a lot in tech and at companies, but it really did feel like a family because we were all in our early 20s and we all grew closer together as friends and co-workers. But then like we saw all these pivotal moments, like that's little Emery, Adrian's beautiful baby girl, and just so many great memories. Next slide, please. There's quite a few of us. We were all kind of coming in different phases, and this is the alumni of curation at VSCO, all these wonderful people. And each one, Mike kind of hinted at this, like each one of us had our own interests, our own styles, and we would talk about it and share our inspiration. And it kind of made it so that we kind of colored each other's passions or interests. So while curating, we'd say, oh, Mike would love this photo. And then you would start to love it. Next slide, please. And we never really talked about this much. I think a lot of people are kind of wondering, does an algorithm run the VSCO collection? Like, how does this all work? And that's kind of chosen by the founders of wanting the curation team to kind of be known as quote unquote phantoms, that kind of just keeping things running and having the focus be on the work. And that kind of leads me to a short history lesson of curation in general. Next slide, Mike. So there's three main founders of VSCO, and they were spread out across the country. There was Joel Flory in Oakland, Greg Lutz in Colorado Springs to be specific, and Wayne Wu in New York. And Greg and his sister Christina, they got the social side of VSCO running. Christina Rouse in general is kind of the curator of the VSCO collection and the curation team. All credit goes to her. She would find photos on other platforms that were being edited with VSCO and highlight them on VSCO. That eventually led to us being able to share photos on the platform, and Christina would curate them, and that led to hiring more people. And next slide, please. And the short and sweet of like just a general overview of how we curate. Mike might have to press those arrows again to kind of run through all those animations. Is we look through all the photos that are submitted. Well, not all, well, caveat there, I'll get back to that. We apply quality ratings, a 1, 2, or 3 star. And those stars are kind of always subjective, always in flux, but they're informed by the history of art and photography And we also would apply descriptive tags to each image that we curate to curate our search as well in the early days. Next slide. And all of this curated content would be shown on the VSCO collection, as you saw, or appear in search for curated results. We would also create curated profiles under different themes. So nature, street photography, fashion, etc. And then we would start to write our own journals, our own editorial content. So we would get to like have more in-depth conversations with all the amazing creators from around the world that were are sharing on our platform. Next slide. Oh, all those animations, I forgot about all this. Okay, so this though, there's another kind of interesting element that curation kind of had to figure out a relationship to, in that in around 2014 or 2015, we saw a huge influx of young women, of just teenagers, who were using VSCO to document their lives similar as a social platform. And that's when we realized that VSCO was also, on top of being a place to express, like for high intent photographers, was also becoming an unexpected refuge from Instagram, because we didn't have comments or likes, favorites displayed. So young people just trying to start their lives were finding a place just to kind of do that and not be bombarded with comments or have to worry about numbers. And so it's always been an interesting relationship from curation of how do we navigate this relationship with, as you all know, VSCO girls. And we try not to be too critical. I mean, this is just people. I think it's honored that people can come to VSCO and just feel like they can express themselves. Next slide, please. But it kind of opened up a conundrum for the curation team, because in the early days, we could see every image that was uploaded every week. It would get up to maybe 100,000 to 200,000 to 500,000. So we would have to really start pushing ourselves. But then the amount of photos uploaded every week would get to 1 million, and then to 5 million, and then to 10 million. So we had to start pushing ourselves. Mike, this is crazy times, right? So we started to set quotas for each curator. Each curator would try and see 30,000 images in an hour. And if we really tried as a team, we could see 1 million photos uploaded from the week. But it was just kind of this insurmountable torrent of content. And it was such an interesting challenge. Like, what does it look like to not use algorithms only for explore spaces, but what does it mean to have a human trying to navigate and find meaning? Really interesting times. And we're, next slide, please. And so that's why I'm thankful for all the people who kind of went through this trial and tried to kind of, like, I mean, Mike's not joking when he said earlier, like, it just kind of completely blows you away to see all this content from around the world, truly. And all these amazing people kind of went in their own direction anyways, except for Luciana, who is our other curator now. And I think this is a very, Mike, I'm enjoying this, having you here, because it's kind of like looking back, because right now curation's kind of at a pivotal moment where we have to kind of rethink the function of the team as it relates to videos, because video has its own history in art and in cinema, which is really rich. And so lots to come there, but this has been a great look back. I'm really thankful for that. And while Mike was a curator, he ran his own curated profiles, and he also interviewed people. And Mike, from my understanding, you have some favorites, right?
I do, yeah. Just looking at, John, when you're sharing that screen of just like all of these pictures, it just reminds me of like, I think that the amount of images we saw in a week, we'd see like hundreds of thousands of images every week. And I sort of felt like after seeing that many images, as I would like after work, I'd be like walking around, and I sort of felt like I started to see things, like almost like see images in every day. Like it was like my brain was like trained to become like almost like a camera. Like it was just crazy how many, the amount of images we saw, I think, is more than, I don't know, I felt like we were just like becoming AI machines almost, huh?
It's not thought that way. Yeah. And in many of this,
Nico!
yeah, we even try to use ML, and that was a whole other interesting territory of like, can you teach an algorithm to recognize good art? And the answer is, at this moment, no, but DALL-E 2 is doing some interesting things there, so you never know. But I'm really,
it's an interesting time for just like everything now feels automated by computers. And so like the role of a human touch and a human perspective is like, I feel like now more interesting than ever, just to have like a human say like, oh, this is what I think is interesting. I mean, it's interesting too what computers pull from humans and then sort of reflect back at us and say this is interesting.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a whole. We could get lost in that topic.
So it's just like, I think after, right, we've learned that there you have to find some kind of hybrid.
Yeah.
I'm just going to chime in here and say, I agree.
So
Yeah.
we've all seen the downsides of letting computers just run, and they just don't get the cultural context of culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, I want to let you keep going because there's a great photo of Mike from he hosted an academy. Academy was a great educational program. It's a little blurry, sorry, but Mike,
Just staying flexible.
Staying flexible.
Yeah, so we when we were a part of the curation team, we're each responsible for curating a couple of like sort of specific collections based on themes that we are interested in. And I really love architecture. And so when I was a part of the curation team, I ran this collection called Blueprint, and it was just an ongoing flow of interesting architecture that we would see while curating from around the world. And so I found a lot of inspiration and a lot of joy in going back to this collection I curated, and just sort of traveling the world via this collection and seeing all the different types of architecture was amazing. But also I remember like I would be curating this collection and then I would go on a walk in downtown Oakland that has, there's some really pretty buildings and a lot of really interesting architecture. There's a Catholic church along Lake Merritt, sort of by our office, that is just unbelievable and beautiful. And I remember I would go walk and I'd be sort of have this collection and this inspiration top of mind when I'd be taking pictures of architecture in Oakland. And then another series I got to work on was called 12 Hours, where we would come across different people who used VSCO in different parts of the world, and we would reach out to them and say, hey, could you document 12 hours of one day, top to bottom, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and take a little 10-second video each hour on the hour of what you're doing, just sort of like everyday life, or if you're going out on the weekend to go surf with friends or whatever it looks like. And this one with Johnny Fraser was really fun to see him surfing in Ireland, which looks really cold, but that was really fun. But there's just so many experiences of drawing inspiration from the VSCO community, and then sort of reflecting that back to the VSCO community to highlight all these amazing creators from around the world that we got to work with. But then also I was able to, and John was able to, and I feel like the whole team was able to internalize a lot of these images and people that we were seeing and meeting, and that sort of changed our own lives and our own art practices as well. Yeah, and it's hard. It's interesting now, like finding ways that looks in my life now. Like finding inspiration has to be like almost an intentional thing now. Whereas back when I was working at VSCO, it was just sort of a part of my job, which was really cool. But now that it's not a part of my job, I feel like I have to sort of like intentionally not just like doom scroll on the internet, and I have to like that, okay, I need to go find inspiration. I need to go to a library and look at photo books. I need to, look at the photo books I have at home, or I need to, and whenever I do, I feel like it sort of opens my brain back up to like, oh yeah, like there's more I can do with my camera. But it's hard to continue to find inspiration. There's so much out there, but it's just, I feel like it takes an intentional effort now. Whereas when we were working at VSCO, it was just sort of built into our everyday, which was such a gift for 5 years for that to be a part of our jobs. It was an honor to share, and I love getting to share with John and Maya. Yeah, that was so fun.
Mike, it was so good to see you.
Oh, likewise.
And everyone, share your work with #VSCO for a chance for curation to see your image on the platform. That's the way we've kind of streamlined it for curation. Is
#VSCO.
Share your work with #VSCO.
All right.
Thanks.
Good to know.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you around.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.